I am not a big Tintin fan at all. I don't know anything about Tintin, but I saw the movie. Just like, I'll see the new Steven Spielberg. I didn't even see it in the theater. We rented it on iTunes or something.
Yeah, same
and
here.
Like halfway through, I was like, gosh, I'm really enjoying this movie.
Yeah.
This feels a lot like a Raiders movie.
Yeah, completely. It's like, why couldn't Crystal Skull have been this?
Yeah.
What the f*** is Tintin?
Indiana Jones, Indiana Jones, Indiana. It's a podcast about Indiana Jones. Every movie, 1 minute at a time. Indiana Jones, Indiana Jones Minute.
Welcome back to the Indiana Jones Minute, the podcast in which we celebrate and discuss the film Raiders of the Lost Ark 1 minute at a time. I'm Tom Taylor.
I'm Pete Mummert.
I'm Jerry Christopher Marcus Porter.
And I'm the guy who wasn't here on Friday. I'm Brett Stillo.
Welcome, Brett.
Thanks.
It's nice of you to join us.
Thanks for having me. You're going to be sorry.
That's the spirit. What brings you here, Brett?
What am I doing here? Well, I am a fan of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was a fan before you guys were fans of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm going to rub that in your faces. It's I'm loving the podcast. It's interesting, like, you guys saw it when you were a little younger. I was a little older than you guys. I was in my teens. And so a different perspective. I mean, I really dig how you guys are kind of reviewing, kind of looking back as like, when I was 10, but I was 16, 17 when I saw it. So different perspective.
You would have beat us up.
No, you would have beaten me.
You really could have liked Marion.
You know what to do with your feelings about Marion.
And she was about your age.
Yeah. And I will, this will be a teaser, so you folks want to tune in for Friday.
Uh-oh.
I knew the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark like 9 months before you guys did.
Whoa.
Wait, you guys, I feel like, did you guys get short round on the show? Who is this guy? How'd you know the ending?
You gotta wait till Friday.
What did he
I
just
can't wait till
say?
Friday. I'm part of this.
Well, we're here to talk about minute 76 of Raiders, and minute 76 begins with Marion being screamed at by a corpse, and it ends with a crazy, awesome-looking flying wing plane.
You know what's great about this minute?
What?
At the very beginning of this minute, we got a Forrestal cameo.
First Barranca came back, now Forrestal. Gosh, that's nice.
And he screams, and there's the whole thing. It's like it's like a wonderful Forrestal funhouse.
It actually is really beautiful.
So I've been wondering about this scene since I was a little kid, though. Is Marion imagining all of this, and is this just sort of a weird point of view scene, or is this Shishak working his magic, and these guys are all coming to life?
Those are both strong possibilities. Since we talked to, I asked the question back in the map room if that big flash of light was too crazy, but Kevin Marr, our guest at the time, said that, maybe it's just Indy's, that's how he saw it. That's, when he tells the story later, that's how he's telling it. Maybe that's true of Marion right here. She's, oh my gosh, I was surrounded by corpses and mummies, and they were screaming at me, and there were snakes coming out of their mouths. Oh my God. That kind of thing.
Well, so I was thinking, I mean, in real life, it would be, there would be like a microsecond of bone rattling.
Yeah.
And then it would be dead silent.
And just her going, ugh.
Like desert, dead, bone dry silence.
Yeah. Well, except for like Indy probably scrambling over similar corpses in another part of the room. Like, Jesus!
They put this in there because, you know what, this whole little necropolis scene is just a fantastic icebreaker at slumber parties.
It is.
You know? It says, because you're all saying, what would you do if a snake came out of the mummy's mouth? Well, I'd
What if you were
strangle the king
surrounded
mummy
by corpses?
first.
And that jerk from next door comes over, and then you'd eat monkey brains, man.
No, I wouldn't. Shut up.
Why'd we invite him?
I wonder if this is Spielberg's dry run for Poltergeist.
I think it is his dry run for Poltergeist.
Yeah.
If you think about, how movies get made, production, pre-production, he was probably looking at the script.
Yeah.
Something I came across the other day, maybe you guys have already talked about this, but an early draft of the, what was going to be the sequel, pre-Temple of Doom, was Indy in a Haunted House.
That's right.
Yeah, and you guys might have already talked about this, but yeah,
Uh-oh.
I guess Steve put the kibosh on that. It's like, nah, I just did a haunted house movie. No thanks. I want to move on. So
It was very well received and everyone loved it, so why would I want to do that again?
yeah,
Well, I did notice that these aren't really mummies. I mean, they're not wrapped up in mummy regalia. They're just skeletons. Yeah, they're just skeletons.
That's a good point. I was going to call
that
them
help?
mummies in my little summary there, but I'm like, oh, they're not really mummies.
They're not really mummies. And I was thinking, I mean, what a rude awakening it would be for these ancient Egyptians, who paid good money to be buried downtown in the Well of the Souls, which I'm sure was all the rage.
Sure.
And now, now they're being ripped out of their 3,000-year serene afterworld slumber,
Yeah.
awakened by this screaming barefoot bridal freak.
Getting yelled at by a bartender.
Yeah. It's like they didn't sign up for this.
welcome to the 20th century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, that Scream, it's kind of that reoccurring theme. The candle in the bar in Nepal. There's this hint. Is there something supernatural going on, or is this just air escaping from the husks of mummified corpses, or is that something actually supernatural? It kind of puts us on the edge of our seat. So when in a few a little later when the Ark is in the hold of a certain ship and it starts to get really weird. So I think this is like another hint of that. Like, what's really going on here?
This is just fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
That's true.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a room full of monkeys, or a room full of mummies, monkey mummies.
Well, there's that one guy who I only just realized this time is actually in a sarcophagus that opened up. Like Marion sort of cornered against the wall, and she tosses one guy off of her, and she turns and looks, and there's that guy right there, and I realize that she's standing in one half of the open sarcophagus, and he's standing in the other.
Yeah, well, and these guys were clearly, at least one of them was buried standing upright. Again, that was kind of like, no, they wouldn't have done that.
That's true. Stupid movie.
And the one guy still has sort of beautiful eyes.
Very
that one
Forrestal-like
guy,
eyes.
Yeah, that one, yeah. A bunch of them don't, but then I remember, we were talking to our archaeologists, and they said, well, in Egypt, the decomposition was not nearly as bad, and so maybe some of them kept some fleshy bits on them.
Could be.
Whereas
Oh, by
Forrestal's
the
going to be
way-
gone in like a couple days.
He was looking pretty good. But there's a guy who I never noticed in this scene before, but at minute like 14, 15, it's that overhead shot looking right down on her and all these corpses coming at her. And there's one corpse that you're not going to convince me that it's not a guy, like a human being, a living human being standing there with a gray wig.
Oh,
And
I
like
know
a
who you're
slightly
talking about.
dusty suit. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it.
Well, but they're all like, they're all plucking and grabbing her and then screaming and, I mean, it's just, which is, of course, you'd be like, well, it's clearly that's, air escaping from the husk.
Oh, sure.
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's really
Or is it?
They're being boiled like lobsters.
Yeah.
And then Indy shows up out of nowhere. What's he been doing? I guess finding that ray of light up ahead. And I'm going to repeat this several times over the next few minutes. I have no idea what the layout of the Well of Souls is, because Indy smashed through this wall and got them into this place with all these bodies, and now there is a wall that's exposed to sunlight, even though, they had to dig to the top of the Well of the Souls and go down deep into it. And this doesn't look like it nearly goes up high enough to be exposed to the sun the way it is. I don't get it.
So there's a guy in the outside. This is a good maybe segue. There's a guy trying to figure that out right now.
Yeah.
So when Indy he sees the light and he pushes that block out.
Yeah.
There's a deleted scene, and Spielberg talks about how he wanted to have like a real bookish archaeologist, like a really nerdy guy with a brush outside of the Well of the Souls, brushing off that rock. And Indy pushes the rock out, pushes the block out, and the guy looks at him and faints just dead away.
Yeah.
And you can see the guy at a couple seconds. It's sort of a continuity problem, because when they pan back, you see a guy slumped over.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking the whole scene, I'm with you, Tommy, because I've been taught my whole life that when it comes to masonry, I mean, no one beats the ancient Egyptians.
Yeah.
Apparently the stones on the pyramids are so perfectly chiseled and placed that a dung beetle can't even fart between them. And then now, it's like, what the hell is going on? It's like, did Johnny Ramsey's punch clock forget to caulk the last block? Like he goes, he's like, hey, look, and it's like there's this block that's just it's just poorly placed.
Yeah.
And you're like, if there's one thing that the ancient Egyptians didn't do, it's poorly place a block.
Yeah. Well, it's been there a while, and there's been apparently this part is exposed, so maybe there's been some kind of erosion or something.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
It occurred to me that, when Marion is surrounded by all those corpses and she's screaming, she actually ran like down a passageway like 500 yards.
What, really?
We didn't really, yeah, just like, when you're surrounded by, husks of corpses.
Yeah.
Ah! So just like,
suddenly I'm over here.
Yeah. It wasn't Indy suddenly appearing out of nowhere. It was that he had to catch up to her.
Marion, get back here.
That whole thing is a little like a I don't know, like a dream nightmare in her head sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then this little block business is that like the Well of the Souls attic?
Yeah, that's what I don't get. If that was there the whole time, why didn't they go in that way?
Or is that like a false chamber where people are like, oh, that's just a room full of some mummies, we can ignore that?
Well, it's like, is
Maybe.
that little place been there for 3,000 years?
Yeah. Yeah, it has. Whenever they push that block out and you see Indy and Marion through the hole, and I know what's going to happen and everything works out fine, but I always think, gosh, that hole doesn't look quite big enough for them to easily even sit on that ledge as they scoot out. But then it always is, and it's an extra little bit of excitement for me when I watch the movie.
I don't know. Wouldn't that block be about the size of a blast port, say 2 meters wide? Maybe.
Maybe there's a small thermal exhaust port nearby.
Kinda small.
About the size of a womp rat. And they see that awesome plane through there. The flying wing.
The flying wing.
That thing is not. I was very excited when I found out as a kid that was actually. Well, was it a real thing or was it almost a real thing?
Oh, it was a real thing.
Yeah.
Tom, this is where you and Jared just shut up.
Okay.
Me and Peter taking over the show.
10-4.
Flying wing minute. So, Pete, where do we start with the flying wing? Yeah, it was a real plane. So, So you guys would be 8, 9, 10 years old, and you probably never saw anything like that before.
No.
Yeah, it was just a really cool looking airplane. And this is, I think, where, in Raiders, they really did their homework. They were really trying to, capture the mood and the feeling of a pulpy 30s serial adventure. And yeah, the Flying Wing was the plane of the future. It was, this is the next phase of aviation. And number one, yeah, there were flying wings in the 1930s. It was an experimental aircraft. And in the late 70s, early 80s, there was what you would call the cult of the wing. Without going too nuts here, the Flying Wing was just this, it never happened kind of a design that aviation nerds like me and Pete were, thinking, why didn't that catch on? Why didn't that catch on? And by the late 70s, you had guys like Jack Northrop, the guy who, one of the key designers of the Flying Wing, who was just trying to say, yeah, it was a valid design.
So did they never actually make it?
No, there were a number of experimental aircraft with the wing design. In fact, our German flying, our Raiders Flying Wing is partially based on the Northrop N9M, which was a prototype flying wing that Northrop Aircraft built in the 1930s.
And so is it, I mean, what makes it the Flying Wing is that the edges of the wings bend downwards?
Well, it's just a giant wing. Like there's no fuselage. It's just like the plane is just a wing.
It's all lift. It's all lift.
I like it.
I mean, did it work?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna name something the Flying Wing, I guess it's kind of presumptuous. It's not out yet. Maybe you name it after you test it.
The gently taxiing wing.
The gently taxiing wing. They did fly. There were a number of wings. One of the most famous flying wings was a German jet flying wing, the Horten HO229. Which is being restored at the Smithsonian. That's also one of the inspirations for the Raiders Flying Wing. I'm trying to think, it was just one of those like prototype things that never caught on in mainstream aviation. And in the late 70s, again, I mentioned the cult of the wing. There was a documentary that sort of stipulated that the American Flying Wing, the XB-49, was that program was blackballed due to political reasons. The Secretary of the Air Force didn't like Jack Northrop, who built the plane. So it's just kind of one of those things, woulda, coulda, shoulda.
It was too cool to exist.
Too cool to exist. And there was a great little documentary made in 1979 that I remember seeing at the time. I sent a link to Pete. I'll put a link on the website, but it's it talks about this. It's one of the last interviews with Jack Northrop, and it just talks about the Flying Wing and what could have been. And interestingly enough, in this PBS documentary from 1979, what's the music they use in the intro? The Star Wars theme.
Very cool.
Yeah.
This plane that they built, the Flying Wing they built for the film, sort of this mock-up of a flying wing, actually sat in the Tunisian desert for several years after the movie was made, and salvagers and collectors used to come and take pieces of it.
Oh my gosh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I guess finally bulldozed in 1991.
Yeah.
They used a bulldozer to get rid of that plane.
And there's a whole little production designers, there's a whole little backstory to this thing. It's actually, known as the Blohm and Voss VB-38. Blohm and Voss being an actual German aviation company that made some pretty far-out aircraft. They had some pretty far-out aircraft designs. And, Norman Reynolds and Ron Cobb were the guys who designed this thing. And, they are also airplane nerds.
Oh,
and
cool.
they created this little fictitious backstory that it's an experimental fighter bomber from the 30s, and there it is making the Cairo run.
I was going to say, Pete, do you think this feeds into your sort of side project of trying to connect Raiders to the Man in the High Castle? Like this is like an alternate Nazi history where they
that's perfect. Yeah,
a little bit more together, that they were actually able to put this together.
Yeah,
Have this would be a real thing.
The future that wasn't.
Well, I completely believe that you knew the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark before anyone else. I'm convinced.
I dreamed it.
Pete, what's real quick? What the hell is the little hieroglyph when Indy pushes the block out?
Oh yeah,
that's
I forgot about it. It's Ra's sun disk, and I think it's cool because Indy is coming out of the underworld, just like Ra would at the end of every day, and he would rise into the sun, like rise into the daylight as the sun. And so we have this hieroglyph of the sun rising into the day, just like Indy is rising up out of the carbonite in the underworld.
And just to be clear, no one thought of peeking in that for 3,000 years.
I think that guy was about to. The guy who's passed out.
Huh. All right.
Yeah,
you see that guy there. That was part of that deleted. There's like a guy. He's just that's the guy you're talking about. He's just kind of sitting there snoozing.
That's another thing I didn't notice all the times I've watched this movie until I saw it in the theater again a couple weeks ago. And then I finally noticed that guy.
I never noticed that guy.
And you never will?
Yeah.
But I love it. He's the one guy in the movie after Barranca that's doing actual archaeology.
Oh, wait, do you think he's that same guy who you were noticing?
Oh, yeah, maybe he's the
Well of Souls
disguised
dude?
guy. Yeah.
Maybe. He took his disguise off. Or maybe there's another one.
Yeah, this is his.
Well, I'm excited. I'm very excited to get into what happens next. So why don't we wrap this one up? And Pete, can you tell people where to find us and insert something clever?
I don't know about the clever part, but check us out on Facebook. If you want to join our conversation at the listeners page, it's Indiana Jones and the Listeners Crusade. And we will put up a link there and on our website to the video Brett was talking about.
And please come back tomorrow. Brett, will you come back and help us through these crazy minutes?
Well, it's going to be tough. I'm supposed
come on.
I'm supposed to take my flying wing and make a dope run for Herman Goring, but I think I can fit it in. I'll try.
See if you can fit us in.
I'll try to fit it. Herman, if he doesn't get his dope, he gets a little nervous.
Well, we hope that goes okay and that you can join us tomorrow for minute 77 here on the Indiana Jones Minute.